Welcome to Tarp 101. The aim of this series is to show you the best way to put up your tarp with two main factors, speed and simplicity. So let's get started on part one, location. The two main factors you want to consider when finding a location for your tarp are safety and protection from the elements. So firstly, protection from the elements, you want to be thinking about wind direction, whether it's going to rain or not. So I know in this situation where I am now that the predominant wind direction are westerlies. West is over there, so I'm thinking about setting my tarp and using the tarp as a wall. What you really don't want is wind coming in either end of your tarp. So before you consider where you're setting up your tarp, you've got to think about the predominant weather conditions in your area. So now you're happy with the predominant wind direction and the orientation of where you want your tarp. Then you need to find a couple of trees, generally between about 5 meters distance between them. That's roughly about 16 feet. You want to make sure that the trees have got a good amount of girth, that there's not too much movement in them, and that they're also healthy, because one of the most important things is to look up and check that there's no deadfall, or widow makers they might be called as well. So when you're looking up, just to check the sort of health of the tree, the age of the tree, and just looking really good look at the branches above to make sure there isn't anything in high winds that could snap off and fall down and potentially cause you harm. So in conclusion of part one, we're looking at three main factors. One, that's the inclement weather, wind direction, orientating your tarp to make sure that you are protected from the elements. Two, we're looking at the distance between the trees you're going to use. Roughly about 5 meters, that's about 16 feet-ish. Three, and most importantly, we're looking at safety. So we're looking up, checking for any deadfall or widow makers. One of the most common ways to set up your ridgeline anchor, and you'll see this a lot, is that people generally tie an overhand knot in the end of their rope on a bight, and they'll create a loop. Very simple knot. They'll then put that around the tree, and then they'll pull the rest of the paracord, their ridgeline, all the way through that. There's nothing wrong with doing that. The only issue with that is it's not a very quick and efficient way of doing it. It's secure, yes, but I'm going to show you a much easier way that will just release in an instant. Okay, so what we're going to do here is create a slippery overhand knot. This is a very simple knot to do, and it will allow you to release your ridgeline in one quick action without feeding anything through. So we've got the end of our paracord here, or whatever cord you're using for your ridgeline. We're going to bring that around the tree. So we've got our ridgeline here and the end of our ridgeline here. So as we've got our two ends, ridgeline and end there, we're going to make a loop with the end here, a nice simple loop coming around there, and you can see that loop there. So we've gone over the top with the loop, you can see that running over the top there. Because we've gone over the top, we'll go over the top of our ridgeline, and all we're going to do is just pull a little bite from that tail end and pull that through. As simple as that. What that allows is to choke this ridgeline, to get it nice and tight, to get it anchored where you want. But the beauty of this knot, because it's a slippery overhand knot, you've got the loop here and the tail end, and we're just going to pull that, and everything comes undone. So once we've got our ridgeline anchor set to our desired height, we can then move this over and start looking at tensioning the ridgeline. When it comes to tensioning your ridgeline, a lot of people have very complicated, extravagant systems using trackers hitches and carabiners and all sorts of wonderful gadgets to get the line super tight. Now, when it comes to tightening the line, you really don't need it that tight. It's not carrying any load, you're not walking on it. So we can get that line as tight as we need just by pulling, without any assistance from 3-to-1 pulley systems and all sorts of things. Now remember, part of this series is about speed and simplicity. And when you're setting up a tarp, it might be raining, the weather might be horrible, and you just want to get it up quickly, easily, and simply. And this is the best way. Okay, so we're going to take our ridgeline here, we're going to pull it around the tree, and just get that just fairly taut, doesn't have to be super tight there. We're going to take the rest of the ridgeline, we're going to place it over the top. And we're going to pull that back. This is where you can tension the rest of the line. So this is where you get your tension. That is going to be more than enough for our ridge line. We're going to come back around the tree, keeping that tension on, back around the tree, and then this is the crucial part. So we are going to do another slippery overhand knot. So we're creating a loop here, the same as before. You can see that loop. We're going to place that loop just on the end there and just pinch it where it's choked. And as you can see where that's pinched, we're just going to pull the rest of this line, creating a bite here, and just pull that nice and tight. And that is all you need to do. The beauty of that is you can just, again, the same on the anchoring system, is just pull that line all the way and the whole thing comes loose. Tarp placement. One of the first things you want to do with your tarp, you might notice, depending on what brand you get, this is a DD hammocks, which are great lightweight tarps. They come with guy lines. One of the first things you want to do is get rid of those guy lines. They just get in the way, and I'm going to show you a fantastic way of tying your own guy line, which makes it a lot more flexible. Once we've got rid of our guy lines, we've got the tarp here. This is folded up, but you notice on the center, we've got our ridgeline loops. If you wanted to use these, you would have had to have thread these through the ridgeline before you've put it up. I never use these, and for good reason. I like to adjust my tarp depending on what I'm doing. If I'm sleeping, I might want both sides down. If I'm cooking, I might want one side further down than the other. As soon as you put these loops through, you're basically committed to that tarp setup until you take your ridgeline down. So it's just something to bear in mind. So there are two different tarp setups I'll have depending on whether I'm cooking or whether I'm sleeping. If I'm sleeping, I'll generally have equal sides on the tarp either side. And that just, one, gives you a psychological kind of edge where you're a bit more closed in the hammock and it's just a bit cozier. Two, if the weather changes, which it can in the woods, but generally you're going to get your prevailing winds, and it's quite rare for the wind to really switch around certainly in the woods that I use here in the UK. But it can happen. So it's good to just have that weather protection either side with equal sides on the tarp. The second is cooking. I usually use about 2/3 of the tarp behind me, again blocking that prevailing wind, and then I like to have 1/3 of it covering over the top, and that just allows for a bit of protection from the rain if it's going to rain. It also allows me to have a fire with less tarp material over the fire, a bit higher up with less chance of it catching fire. So there are two really good uses of the tarp. There's obviously lots of different ways of doing it, but in my experience, they're the two that I use all of the time. And it's simple because you don't have to necessarily adjust the ridgeline. You can just pull the tarp to one side, reset it with the guy rope knots, and you're good to go. So you can see I've draped the tarp over half and half. You know you're half and half because you've got your ridgeline toggles here, which we haven't put on, and for good reason. I'll show you why in a bit. So what we're going to use to set this tarp are prussiks. Prussiks are fantastic friction devices to add tensioning to whatever you might want to add tension to. So we're actually going to use the Klemheist prussik, and I'm going to show you how you tie that now. So there's a few different ways of tying prussiks, Klemheists, French prussik, lots of different ways. Well, we're going to stick with Klemheist, but to make a prussik, essentially it's a loop. There's a couple of different ways of tying the loop. We've just done a simple overhand knot there, but you could do a double fisherman's. There's a few different ways of doing them, but for simplicity and speed, we're just going to do a simple overhand knot. So to make a prussik loop, you want a bit of cord about that length. They can vary a little bit, but that's pretty good. You're going to bring both ends together, and you're just going to do the simplest knot there is, which is a overhand knot. just thread that through there, and then you can see just a very simple overhand knot. Some people are concerned about dressing these and making sure they're nice and neat. That's good in climbing and things when your life depends on it. All we're doing here is tensioning up a tarp. So once you've done that, you've essentially got your loop ready for your prusik. So tying a Klemheis prusik is actually very simple. What you want to do is take the knotted end, hold it on the top, and then you've got a loop on this side of the paracord. So we're going to bring this knotted end down through the loop, and we're going to go around once, and then we're going to go around and through twice, and then we're going to go around and through for the third time. And that is essentially it. You want to make sure the knot is nicely dressed, because the nicer it's dressed, the more effective it's going to be at pulling. Now, one of the interesting things about prusiks is generally the rule is you want your prusik to be thinner in diameter than what you're attaching it to, in this case the ridgeline. Now, I'm using this as an example, again for simplicity. I've cut this bit of paracord off the ridgeline and made a prusik because I wanted to show that it can still be done with the same diameter. It would be more effective with a thinner diameter, but I just want to come out using one bit of paracord and be able to do everything with that rather than come out with different diameters of paracord and different materials. So now this is where simplicity kicks in, and this is my favorite part. So we've got our prusik that's ready to go, that's adjustable, that moves up, and then you can pull it down and it's not going anywhere. You can slide it down, but under tension, that's not moving anywhere. We've also got the loop on our tarp, but we need to attach both of those. So just looking around, in fact, I'll give you a couple of different examples of different bits, and this is literally just found on the floor. So these are all dead. I mean, look at that. That's just completely crumbling, horrible, dead. But it doesn't matter. All of this is going to do is just hold those in place. Again, I've got a bit of a thinner one, dead, easy to snap, doesn't matter. I mean, let's just use that. So, snapped off a little bit of there. That is what we're going to use to attach them both. So all we're doing is bringing our prusik down, we're taking our knotted end of the prusik, we're feeding that through the loop here. So we've got a little loop, and all we do is just put that stick in that loop and then slide the prusik up. And at this point, I've put a prusik on the other side, so there's tension there. You can just slide this until it's super tight. So at this point, we've got a prusik on that end and a prusik on that end attached by two sticks just found on the ground. Now, that's under tension now on the ridgeline, but it's not fixed in place if we don't want it to be. The beauty of this system is that you can slide it up and down depending on where you want it. So I can come up here. If I want it to go a bit more down that way, I can just slide this entire tarp down that way a bit and tighten it up because it was a bit too far up that way. You've got options to adjust the tarp and keep it tight. Fantastic. So we set up the ridgeline, and the tarp is now on the ridgeline and it's tensioned with the prusiks. So the last thing we need to do is start fine-tuning the tarp and actually start pegging it down and making it tight. Now this is where a lot of people kind of fall short. So I use pegs. I've got titanium pegs. These are lightweight. These just fit straight in the tarp bag. Sometimes whittle down pegs from the wood. You can just whittle down a few pegs really quickly from fallen trees or even green wood. Or you can use some of the natural surroundings like branches and things like that. But the key is in the knot that we're going to tie to tension down the tarp. So I've pegged down the other three sides just to make this demonstration a bit easier. Generally what I do with tarps is I'll peg down each side. I won't tighten them up fully, just to get them in roughly the right position. And then once they're all in, I'll go around and fine tune to make sure everything's tight and taut, just in case the wind picks up. So what we're going to do is to tie our hitch here, and this is called a taut line hitch. The first thing we're going to do is just attach, and this is just some of the paracord. It's actually a different bit of paracord, but the exact same brand, just a different colour. But again, just for simplicity and speed, you can use the same paracord for all of this. That's what I'm trying to teach, is just simplicity is sometimes the best thing. So we're going to lark's foot this bit of line. So I've just taken the end of the line, I've folded it over just to create a loop there, and I'm going to pass that loop through our loop from the tarp, and then I'm going to pull everything back through that loop, and that is just called a lark's foot. So now that's attached, you've got your little bit of loop just sort of dangling down there, and then this is our guy line that we're going to use. So I've got my peg, but like I said, you can whittle down a peg, you can use a root, a bottom of the tree, a branch, whatever it might be. But in this instance, I'm going to use a peg, and I'm going to try and follow the direction. This is kind of key, is following the direction of the tarp and the loop. So keeping that same direction, and I'm just going to bring it down over here, pop the peg in, give that a little step in there, and then I'm just going to wrap it round. So I don't have to pull any tension right now, I'm just keeping that there. So as you can see, it's not under a lot of tension. At this point, this is where we're going to do a taut line hitch, and this is a fantastic knot, not just for this, but it's got other uses as well. So to tie a taut line hitch, you've got your line running from the tarp, looping around the peg, and then coming up with the working end. So we bring the working end, we're going to take it over the top, and we're going to wrap it round once. We're going to wrap it round twice, and then we're going to come over the working end and underneath the tarp line and just pulling a bite through there. And that is literally as simple as it is. So what that gives you is a tensioning system. So you can push that up, and as you can see, it starts to tension up that line. You can loosen it off just by pulling it back down, and it's a really fantastic, brilliant knot just to adjust and pull tension in your line. So at this point the tarp's looking pretty good, but what I'm going to do now that I've got all of the guy lines in and I've tied those with the taut line hitch, I'm just going to go around and just adjust and fine tune. And what I'm looking for is just to get any creases. I mean, there's not really any creases in there at the moment, but I'll probably get this whole thing a little bit tighter and just even out everything, and then the tarp is ready. Obviously what you can do, you've got a few more loops down the central bit if you really wanted to just make that super solid. If in case of high winds, you've always got the option just to run a couple of more taut lines to some branches or to some hooks just to secure it down a bit, but generally 4 points is pretty good. The prussicks are holding nicely, everything's set there, so it's all good. One of the things that I just wanted to point out, which is to do with these top loops. Now the reason I don't have these on is because if they were on the Ridgeline right now, it would be set in that position. For me now to change, obviously at the moment I've got a 50-50 sided tarp. If I wanted to change that and maybe pull down that side and pull this side up a bit, all I have to do is just unhook these pegs and just slide it up, reset the pegs, tighten it up to where I want, and just adjust those taut lines again. So it's a really easy method to keep adjusting the tarp for how you want to use it, whether you're cooking or sleeping. Now some people will have this a bit steeper sided, This is about the limit I'd go in terms of angle. I wouldn't make it a shallower angle than this, but when I'm in the hammock, I quite like to have that airy roof rather than a steep-sided roof. Obviously, when it's steep-sided, it's going to be a bit more secure. It's going to run rain off and water off a lot easier, but I find that this sort of angle is pretty good. Anything shallower than that, I would be worried about the security of the tarp. So one of the nice things I like to do once I've got the hammock set up underneath the tarp is use this ridgeline. This ridgeline running underneath is another really good reason to have it underneath rather than on top through the loops. Yes, you could set up some kind of other little line running through, like for a washing line or something like that, but it's extra work, and this is all about simplicity and speed. So using this ridgeline, remember we got our prussicks. I would just add a couple more prussicks in on this ridgeline on the inside, and then when you're in your hammock, it's just a really nice easy thing to hang your shoes on, or your torch, head torch or something like that, and you can just slide that up and down in position right to the end depending on where you want it, and it's just a really good way of just storing extra things, really keeping them off the ground. So the second tip is just a nice way to just store your bag off the ground, keep it on a tree. So you just need to find yourself a stick. This is actually a dead stick, but any stick will do. Feed that through one of your straps, put it round the tree, and then just feed your other strap, and then that's literally just friction that will hold that in place, and then you can just access everything. Keeps your bag out the way. If you know there's no rain coming, you can just keep that there all night. A great thing about the taut line hitch, which I'm a big fan of in everything really, is that it's just releasable. So you pull on the loose line and then it comes out. Easy as that. I just want to show you how quick and easy this is to actually put up. Remember, in this series we're talking about speed and simplicity, so we're using one bit of paracord, a couple of simple knots to use the most effective and efficient way of getting the ridgeline up. There it is, as easy as that. Super easy way to put up the ridgeline, simple, no fuss. And then it just comes down with a quick, sharp pull. And the same again on this side. Easy. Just want to show you how simple and quick it is with that ridgeline running underneath and using these taut line hitches to change this from sleeping to cooking. So what we're going to do first is just loosen off these taut lines. I'm going to be lifting this side up. So we just loosened off those. While we loosened off those, we're going to just take the prusik down a bit, take our little chocks of wood out, and we're going to shift this up to this little loop. And that is going to be our new ridgeline center line. So then I'll just pull that back. I'll go over to the other prusik. I'll do the same again. I'll just loosen that off a bit so I could just take the stick out, pull the prusik out, take the center line loop, move it up a little bit, and then just rejig that. Lovely. Pull the prusik tight. Excellent. Now I'm just going to tension up the slack that's created on the back side, and this is really where those taut line hitches come in, because it's just a simple tensioning system. Tension that one up. Loosen that off a bit. Lovely. So that's the back ones tensioned. And now we're just going to pull tight on the front ones. I'll start from that side. Just get a little bit of tension in there. I'm just going to even out this little crease by tightening up that side. And there you go. It's as simple as that. That is the key to not using those loops on the top, so you've got the freedom to just shift this entire system around from a kind of 2/3, 1/3 system to half and half. And these are the two systems I use. Half and half for sleeping, 2/3, 1/3 for cooking. If there's any questions you've got on anything we covered, just shoot me a message. And if there's any other courses you think I should do, just let me know. Thank you.